Hello guys, Dominic again here with another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the Epstein files and what I think they say about society and the public as a whole. So I am reading off a little bit of a script here today. Usually I don't, but to me, people seem shocked that that Epstein was involved with all these different people, but more importantly, the fact that the people he's involved with who are in powerful positions and the conspiracy theories that are associated with them have turned out to be true, such as things like a 9/11 was an inside job, or things like there's a satanic network of pedophiles who run the world and they do parties of debauchery involving things like cannibalism, human sacrifice, and the touching of minors without their consent. Now, I have heard some people say that these minors actually did consent to it, and these people need to look more into psychology because there's no way a minor can consent to something like this, because a minor is still learning their body and they're still learning who they are. They don't understand the level that they're being taken advantage of. So what really stands out to me, though, is not really that these things are true, because there's been many people for a long time saying exactly this. And even people who are connected to people like Epstein and other elite groups, they've come out and say, when their moral compass says, I can't be a part of this, people have come out and said things like, the world's run by a satanic network, or 9/11 was an inside job, or any other conspiracy theory you can think of involving the ruling class and their insane ways and beliefs. But instead, people have largely chosen for a number of years to ignore these people, mainly because they're labeled things like conspiracy theorists from the government. And because they don't have the official narrative on their side, people don't trust these people because they don't see how, number one, the world they've come to know could possibly be as bad as the so-called conspiracy theorists are describing. And number two, that they typically can't deal with the implications of the fact that they're supporting evil and that they would need to change themselves. Because as it is now, most people are trusting the government, and now, today, many of their claims have been proven only because the government says it's true. And now that the government says it's true, now people are paying attention, when instead they should have been paying attention for decades, especially considering it's no secret that many whistleblowers or anyone who goes against the status quo too much, they end up disappearing, or they end up unaliving themselves. So these files, the Epstein files, they should point out to people, if anything, that the government is not to be trusted. And I think people understand that, but they don't understand this enough, I think. They're not going far enough. Because the very tactics that the government is providing this information points to the fact that they don't want people to understand what's really going on. The government is basically engaged in the tactic of information overload. They know that no one can read 3.5 million pages of debauchery that the Epstein files are describing. It would take years for anyone to do that. And from what I've seen, many people are coming together and they're reading them and they're just offering their perspective based off of the limited information they've taken in from the government approved files. And this is a good way because it gets people working together against the worldwide network of Satanists. But at the same time, it's limited because it's just an information overload is what it is. No one can process it in the amount of time that really we should be, right? Because, people like Donald Trump, they'll probably have finished off their term and they'll have gotten scot-free by the time people, I think, have properly dissected those files. But on top of this, for many years, people who spoke out, they're not only labeled conspiracy theorists, but there was a time in the United States when dissidents were put into mental asylums and they would undergo treatments of lobotomies or electroshock therapy to make them more manageable. Lobotomy is essentially they're just going to cut your prefrontal lobe or make some sort of incision that removes basically free will from you and makes you more complicit, more easier to control, and docile. It's not a precise surgery. It sure isn't. But this is what they're doing. This is what they were doing to people for a long time. The United States was very big in eugenics before the swastika people came along. In fact, that's where they got it from. But the United States eugenics plan basically revolved around removing poor people. So when a poor person got too intelligent, or they started to realize that the world that they're living in is actually run by evil, they could be declared insane, and all their government privileges granted by things like the Constitution and their rights to basically represent themselves at all or vote will be stripped away because you're deemed mentally unstable and therefore a threat to those around you. And over the years, it got progressively lighter for these types of people. We're not performing lobotomies on conspiracy theorists today, as evident by the amount of people who are labeled that on the internet. But the stigma is still there. And, now after decades of gaslighting the public into thinking that there are no satanic pedophiles running the world, except for maybe a brief moment in the 80s known as the Satanic Panic. Now the government is coming out and saying, yes, the world is indeed run by these satanic pedophiles, and everyone is eating right out of the government's hand because now the government is coming out and saying it, and that's what's important. Not that people have been saying it for years, people who have claimed to have these experiences for years who just get, brushed away because the implications of their experience would shatter the paradigms of the public. And this protects the ruling class because, as I stated, the public, they don't want to come to grips with the fact that they've been supporting evil through voting or through their jobs, which help build the system, or none of these things. Because that puts a burden or a level of responsibility on the individuals who make up the public. So really what it comes down to is at some point, people have to stop trusting the government, because this incident has shown that people don't trust the government enough. They don't distrust it enough, rather. Because the government will continue to provide disinformation and misinformation blended with truth, just enough to keep people going along with the overall lie. And guys, really, What the government is basically telling you by releasing these files is we know it's been going on for decades, but we've chosen not to do anything about it. And now that we've been caught, we're going to release these 3.5 million files that we know the public can never decipher in one sitting, or even in a year, because there's just too much information for any one individual. And we're just going to pretend pretty much almost like it didn't happen. But at the same time, we're going to have all this back and forth on Capitol Hill. We're going to have all these talks with people like Pam Bondi between senators, and they're going to have this theater just like they always do. But in the end, they're not going to actually solve the problem. They might lock up some people, but they're not going to actually stop the worldwide network of pedophiles, because as these documents show, the satanic elite are the government. They run the government. So they might, throw some people under the bus as needed, but they aren't going to go away completely. And don't ever expect the government to get rid of them completely. They never will. They're intermingled. Instead, we have to learn to trust each other. We have to realize that some people are out here just trying their best with the limited information that they've come across. And some people are better at deciphering the information and putting out a more coherent narrative than others. But for many years, there have been many intelligent people who have been saying exactly what the Epstein files say. And to the public, they've mostly fallen on deaf ears. So the question is, how much longer will we trust liars and distrust those who might not have the full picture, but are more genuine than the people leading us astray, the so-called authority figures who run civilization? And this is what it comes down to. Are we going to put our trust in ourselves and our fellow neighbor, or our fellow human being, who ultimately is not in much a different position than we are? Or are we going to continue to put our trust into entities like the government, who have basically broken the social contract that their entire trust is built upon? Because if any government was legit, they would never let anything like this happen. But the fact that pretty much every government goes along with it tells you right there, no government is legit. And before I end it, I'm going to mention one person. Jay Parker of Matrix Warriors is an individual who grew up within the satanic elite. He describes the abuse he went through and the trauma designed to bind him to the ruling class. But he came out of this. He said, no, I'm not going to participate. And he does imply that they do give people a choice, but they try to make that choice difficult by grooming them through trauma throughout their formative years as a child. So with that, guys, I just have to ask the question of, who are you putting your trust in? Are you putting your trust in the liars such as the government? Or are you seeking out more genuine people who actually want to speak the truth and understand what's really going on in the world and share it as genuinely as they possibly can? Which I know is a tall order in today's world, but those people are out there. And even from the gatekeepers, like these Epstein files, which is released by gatekeepers, there's still a lot of information to learn. But we have to learn to decipher and separate the fruit from the seeds. So with that, guys, that's my video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys again.